before we get started on some of the stuff that I think matters, particularly when it comes to local government here and why you were in Christchurch, just quickly, Labour and the Greens criticised you for singling out Kakare as red tape in the Resource Management Act. What exactly did you say?
Well, I simply pointed out some of the consenting conditions that have been put on recent developments. One was a solar farm in Hawke's Bay, another one was an IKEA store in Auckland, and in each case, as part of their consenting condition, they have to, not just once, but actually at various stages of their work, stop and put their tools down, wait for iwi to show up. They might or might not do that. In the case of IKEA, there's 7 different iwi groups who all kind of fight over who has real ownership or mana whenua status in Auckland. And you have to wait for them to come along and basically down tools and wait for a karakia. Now, I just made the point that, we moved beyond that. Once upon a time, Galileo was not allowed to look through his telescope or describe what he saw because it was at odds with what the church thought. And then we said, no, actually, people's spiritual beliefs and what actually happens in the world day to day, those are separate things. Now, there are still parts of the world where your spiritual beliefs can kind of determine how far you get in life. But New Zealand should not be one of those places. New Zealand is an enlightened society, and we shouldn't have to stop practical things for spiritual practices. That's what I said, and needless to say, all the usual suspects are deeply upset.
Why are they upset by that, do you think?
Because they have come to believe that there is some sort of original sin, and the way to atone for that sin is to carry out these practices. And if they do it wearing an enormously heavy piece of pounamu or greenstone, symbolising the weight of guilt they feel, then they can be delivered. And so it is almost a sort of quasi-religious practice. And again, I don't have anything against religion. Lots of people have faith and it provides a lot for them. It's when you try and impose one person's faith on another that you have a problem. Are
these cultural procedures, are they paid for? Would IKEA have to pay for the karakia to remove a tree or whatever you?
Yeah, because here's the other thing. There are cases where local Maori are just saying, look, we're sick of being trotted out for this. So, yeah, you generally have to pay. I mean, I'm not aware of the payments that were made in the case of these particular resource consents, but, by and large, there's a fee. And in a way, I mean, I'm not against that. If you're going to require someone to be there, then you probably should compensate them for doing it. I'm just opposed to the whole thing completely.
You said today, I think it was today in Christchurch at this local government conference meeting or what have you, councils are baked into decades of regulatory complexity, and you're right by that. You only have to watch council meetings on YouTube to understand that. But what's actually going to change? What are you going to do to actually change that so it's less complex and councillors can actually work more effectively on behalf of the people they represent?
Well, there's some little pieces and there's some big ones. I mean, little ones are like, from the middle of this year, you don't have to get a council licence to run a hairdresser anymore. So one of the mayors there, Nick Smith, this morning said, look, thank you for that, because it's $250 per council. The reality is, per hairdresser. That's what they pay us. The reality is it costs us twice that. And it doesn't prove or change anything because lots of people are just cutting hair in their basement anyway. So actually, it's just a total waste of time. We got rid of that. It's going to save about $1 million a year nationwide. So there's opportunities for little things like that, and the red tape tip line that the the Ministry for Regulation has is useful for that. Then there's bigger things like the Resource Management Act, hugely complex. Not only is it complicated for the councils to enforce, but also councils are applicants in their own right. So if your town has a sewage plant, then it has to do discharges and it has to operate and take up land and all that. That all requires resource consent that has to be put in place when you first build it and then updated every 35 years. So there's a huge amount. Apologies. There's a huge amount.
What's your cat's name? That's a nice looking cat. Hi, Sam.
We call Sam Manu Mate, which means bird death.
Does that mean he's a killer, David Seymour?
Well, he's only a kitten, but he jumps very high and he watches birds very intently out the window. So we think the more we let him out, the more Manu Mate there could be. Okay. But anyway, putting that aside, look, the Resource Management Act reform, I think, just by reducing the complexity of doing a consent, both as the enforcer and the applicant, I think councils' lives will be simpler. Getting rid of these 4 well-beings, the idea that a council has to work out what your social well-being is and your cultural well-being. I don't actually think that that's something that councils need to do. Then there's this question of what are we doing about things like temporary traffic management? That's been greatly simplified by Brooke van Velden and Chris Bishop. There's new guidance that you don't actually have to have a cone every 10 centimetres in order to do any kind of roadworks. And funnily enough, that doesn't just save councils money on the enforcement, but also on their own activities, because councils have roadworks, councils do pipe networks, councils have all sorts of activities where they actually need to do temporary traffic management for their own works. So there's a bunch of things we're doing right across the government: Local Government Act, Health and Safety Act, Resource Management Act, all of that. There is major reform going on under this government.
Yeah, I mean, you said these 4 well-beings turned councils into second-tier social ministries. And I had a quick look. You're right, there's environmental, there's social, there's cultural. I mean, on the face of it, they don't seem that bad. I mean, can't they be incorporated into what the councils are supposed to do anyway? And in fact, can you give me any examples where you think this is just stupid and it's costing the ratepayer money and it's got to go?
Sorry. I'll just give you an example. It's a little example, but it's a question of, well, how can this happen? I was talking to a community group, charity. They put on cooking classes in the community. They're getting competed with by their local library, which is also putting on cooking classes. Now, I would say, okay, you've got to have a discussion. Are libraries there to be a repository of knowledge, a store of books and public records, or are they there to be a kind of educational organisation that's playing in the skills area? That's a question of what your job actually is. And if you say that the council's job is environmental and social and economic and cultural well-being, well, no one's against those things, but that's not the point. The question is it the council's job? Is it the council's job to teach people how to cook? And I would say cooking's very important. It's just not the job of the council.
Fair enough. I mean, I did. I did notice there was a seminar the council's putting on about can Christchurch or should Christchurch be a walkable city? And I think that's happening at the City Library too. And I thought, well, why is the council putting on these types of things? Is that another example? I mean, look, it's all well intended, but I'm not sure I want my rates going on seminars with the same voices talking to echo chambers.
Well, the council does have responsibility for the roadways and the footpaths, so I guess there's a reasonable case for them to be consulting with people and asking how that happens. But here's the flip side. They shouldn't be going out and giving people an agenda, which is what that sounds like, based on what I know about local government. I'm sure it is. Second of all, there is a consultation. It's called an election. And so, surely if the councillors have gone out and got elected by their neighbours to run the council, they should already know what the agenda is and what they want. I mean, we don't, run it, build up our policies, run for election, get into government, and then go back to people and say, "Oh, are you sure?" Because people would say, "Well, we voted for you." That's the whole point.
Well, as you know, though, those council staff, they're lawyers in themselves. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Speaking of wellbeing projects, though, would you call the Christchurch Stadium a wellbeing project? I mean, that's costing ratepayers a lot of money. I mean, that could be classed as a social wellbeing prize.
Look, I'm good enough, I'm old enough, and have enough scars and experience to know that things like boat races and stadiums and the like make absolutely no sense from the point of view of an economist, because the point is, why if it's such a good idea, why don't the people who benefit just pay for it?
The private sector doesn't, because they're loss-making ventures, aren't they?
Yep, well, pay for it and then lose some more. But I also know that in spite of sensible economic policy, every political leader since Roman times has been building stadiums and putting on bread and circuses to remain popular. So, I can give you the economic case why you shouldn't do it, but I also, after 2,000 years of this stuff in politics, I hold limited hopes of stopping it.
How will benchmarking councils actually improve their performance? That's something you've talked about before, but when you look at benchmarking when it comes to the private sector and CEO pay, all it does is go up, never goes down.
Well, at least you can have voters who are informed and understand what they're voting for. At the moment, if you're a voter and you know that your council's spending $2 billion and then you think, well, is that a lot? If you're able to say, well, you know what, compared with what councils usually spend, there's 5 other councils near neighbouring mine, and they all have less debt and they all have less staff and they all have, lower rates per household, then that maybe gives you a case for saying, you know what, you actually need to tighten the screws and start asking why that is. So look, I agree with you. Benchmarking is not going to solve the problem, but it does enable voters to solve it if they want to.
Deputy Prime Minister, a few final questions. Why haven't open plan classrooms worked, despite being introduced, I think, by the national-led government? I mean, when I post this on my social media page, there was actually positive comments regarding getting back to a traditional classroom.
I think they don't work for the simple reason that they don't support the whole purpose of education. And the purpose of education is there's an adult in the room who knows more than the children, and that adult's job is to transfer the knowledge from one to the next. It's not complicated stuff. Then the next question is, well, how do these decentralised environments work? Well, basically they encapsulate the philosophy of child-centred learning. The basic philosophy is that if you just let kids play together, they will discover the knowledge of Western civilization for themselves. And I don't think that that's very viable. It's not the way we've ever done it before, and it's led to a real decline in standards. It's particularly led to some kids who are sensitive to the noise, don't concentrate very well, to start acting out. And there's been this epidemic of we have these terrible problems with behaviour in schools, I suspect in part because teachers have been undermined in their ability to control classrooms. I mean, if you've got 100 kids, 3 adults, lots of beanbags, massive barn, you don't really have a situation where there's a clear role, one person in control, and ways to act that are obvious to everybody. You contrast that with Tim O'Connor, the Auckland Grammar headmaster, who was recently interviewed on a podcast, and it's really good listen. He says, look, we just give really clear guidance. Everyone knows what the framework is. They know that if they behave in a certain way, the place will work well for everybody. If you don't do that, then you get a lot of behavioural problems. So, look, it's all terrible, but it's being changed. And it's fascinating that when the New Zealand Initiative think tank OAA'd the Ministry of Education for their evidence about modern learning environments, as they were called, they were basically, put there by a TED talk and a PowerPoint presentation. That's the only official information that the ministry could provide. You mentioned it was put in place by a national government. That's true. The good news is we no longer have a national government. Now we have a coalition government. Oh,
nicely said. Chris Hipkins says your UN letter shows Luxon isn't in control, and that, I think he said, quote, Seymour and Peters do as they please. How do you respond to that? Or is this more manufactured crises?
Well, I just find Hipkins quite extraordinary. I mean, his ability to overcome, what was it that Churchill said, success is the ability to go from one failure to the next with no loss of enthusiasm. I mean, Hipkins is successful in that sense, but, what he's saying about Luxon, he's saying he should be in control. Well, actually, the world's moved on from that. We're not in the army. The purpose is not to be in control. I mean, Chris is a modern guy. He actually allows people to work together in an environment and play to their strengths. He's a modern chief executive, basically. So I just find the whole idea that one person's supposed to be in control of another quite old-fashioned. It's that sort of hierarchical view of the world. Probably says more about Hipkins than Chris, Luxon, that is, or me or Winston.
Just finally, David, Here's a headline for you. David Seymour lashes, I think it was slams earlier today, but it's been changed to lashes officials after Linz becomes latest agency raising concerns about his regulatory standards bill. Are you slamming and lashing officials, are you, over this?
Well, no, I just pointed out several things that Linz don't know but should know about the Regulatory Standards Bill. I mean, these guys said it would affect treaty settlements. The Regulatory Standards Bill explicitly says it exempts treaty settlements from its scrutiny. You can argue if that's right or wrong, but Linz should have known that. They're saying that it doesn't allow them to respond quickly in an emergency. Actually, Parliament can still act. Ministers can ignore the Regulatory Standards Bill's provisions if they feel that there's sufficient public justification and urgency to do so. So that they should have known that. And they've said that the Regulatory Standards Bill might stop them taking people's property because of its emphasis on property rights. And I said, look, the Linz, they actually administer the Public Works Act. The main thing about the Public Works Act is it's a mechanism for if the government wants to take someone's property, they have to properly go through the channels and compensate the person. You can't just go around stealing people's stuff. I mean, so, all I've done, if you want to call it lashing, you can. But all I've done is just pointed out things that Linz should absolutely know about the Regulatory Standards Bill before they criticise it. And the attitude you get from these public servants is that New Zealanders and their rights and their property are kind of an inconvenience, and no one should draw attention to them. Well, I say that they're public servants, and upholding our property rights is one of their main duties.
This new warning is yet another nail in the coffin for this doomed bill. I think Greenpeace has said that, saying it's attracted blistering criticism from the UN, legal experts, health professionals, Māori leaders, environmental groups and public service itself. That's what Greenpeace says. What do you say?
Well, all of those criticisms we're really proud to attract. But let's just take a step back and say, what does this bill actually do? It says if a politician in central or local government wants to make a law, then they have to publish what we're going to call a consistency accountability statement. And that's going to show what impact does this law have on people's property, what impact does it have on people's liberties, does it create any new fees or charges that people have to pay? Is it clear in the rule of law? Has the lawmaker, the minister or the councillor thought about the problem they're trying to solve and other ways they could have solved it? And, if you can justify all that, you can make the law. If you can't, well, you can still make the law, but having to fail at answering these questions might make you look bad and embarrass you politically. And I just think putting a little bit of political pressure on people who make laws too fast and don't think hard enough about people's rights, just a bit more pressure on that might mean that we spend less of our time following red tape and regulations, more of our time actually being productive. Do
you expect this bill to pass?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because National's fully supportive, aren't they? And so is New Zealand First, aren't they?
Well, one thing about this coalition, and one reason that it has held together so well, is that we have kept our word on the coalition agreements we signed. ACT has done that on everything. The other guys have done that on everything. And one of the most important things we signed was pass the Regulatory Standards Bill as soon as practicable. Now, we're already in the second half of our term, so it's a bit later than I would like, but, sometimes you got to, be a team player, I guess. But, we've always kept all of our commitments, and there's no reason to think they wouldn't keep this one.
I think the biggest commitment you need right now is I'm concerned about your cat. I think if you fed your cat tonight because it's wanting attention. I actually fed him strategically
before this interview, and he's eaten it all. Wow.
He's still hungry, I think. Either that or maybe he hasn't eaten a bird, a native bird from the Deputy Prime Minister's backyard.
It's a bit of a worry. I hope it better not be native.
He'll probably come back with a bird. Apparently when they come back with a bird, it means that they love you and it's like their gift to you. So if you get a bird tonight, it means your cat is fond of you, all right?
That is what I fear. I hope that he shows us love in other ways.
I'm sure he will. Deputy Prime Minister David Seymour, thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thanks, Chris. See you later.